with us today.
Thank you for
look
having
very
me.
sharp.
Likewise.
I'd love to give a shout out first to your parents who are in the audience. I think it's so awesome they're here. Where are your parents?
They're way in the back. Hi, Mom and Dad.
It was fun to hear that you travel with your parents. I think that's so cool.
Well, this is what I was saying. If you want to have a great business meeting, just bring your parents. Like, try to have your mom in the room when someone's negotiating against you, and the whole tone and the whole tenor of the conversation changes.
So you started Bonobos about 10 years ago when you were in business school at Stanford. Could you ever have imagined 10 years from then being here today where you are?
So I'm a Chicago sports fan, and it's a good year for the Cubs. It looks like it lasts. I know the Giants have had a good run. And we had these really great contrasting speeches given when two great Chicago athletes entered the Hall of Fame. One was by Michael Jordan, who basically said at one point, quote, I would not want to be one of my kids because, boy, do you have big shoes to fill, end quote, which is sort of one end of the spectrum of how to do a Hall of Fame acceptance speech. The other, also number 23, was Ryan Sandberg, who plays for the Cubs, who basically said that if I'd ever thought this day were possible, I don't think I'd be here. And I guess that's how I feel. Like, just before this, I was talking to someone, they were saying congrats on your success, and I don't feel successful. I feel like we always have more to prove. There's always more to do. There are always things that are wrong. It's kind of this philosophy of it's all your fault with leadership. I mean, if I could go through the list of things that are bothering me right now at our company, it would be long. And it's not obvious that you've made it. And pride goeth before a fall, and the role of hubris in human affairs. So I still don't feel like it's possible. And in some regards, I hope I don't feel that way ever. At the same time, you want to honor and recognize your team. And you want your team to feel proud and recognized. And so maybe I don't know what this is like, but maybe it's like being a parent where you probably always feel like you're underperforming, but you want your children to feel like they're doing a great job. I think that's the tension.
So when you started Bonobos in business school, what made you decide to start a pants company? Was there a big void in men's pants at the time that you thought this is going to be the next billion-dollar business?
So as far as being an entrepreneur goes, I did business school all wrong. I was a classic example of to a hammer, everything's a nail. So I was a consultant before business school, then I was a private equity analyst. So I thought that being an entrepreneur was about making a business plan and talking. So I got as many meetings as I could, I talked to as many people as I could, but I never did anything entrepreneurial in terms of actually trying to commercialize a product. And I was inspired and fortunate that I had a housemate named Brian Spaley who felt like men's pants didn't fit. And so he had this basic belief that if you wore a pair of pants, it was either too boxy if it was an American cut, or it was too tight if it was a European cut. And he took matters into his own hands. He made this great pattern with a curved waistband. If you've ever taken off your belt and seen the way your belt curves as you wear it, Bonobos pants are made with that curvature. And it was a real product insight. And really the only thing I brought to the party was I started taking pictures and writing stories and creating a website. And I had spent the summer of 2003 working on Sears' acquisition of Land's End as a Bain consultant. And so I spent a very cold, miserable winter in Dodgeville, Wisconsin. And I got to see the way a direct-to-consumer apparel brand is brought to life. Now, you could make an argument that Sears then kind of ruined that brand. So sometimes I say Bonobos is an act of atonement. I helped take one great direct-to-consumer apparel brand out of the world. I owe one to it. And in 2007, there was this contrarian idea that the internet would be the way that brands would get built. And I just wrote an essay about this digitally native vertical brands concept because to some people it's still contrarian. I happen to think the next 100 years of retail, we're going to reorganize from an automobile to a smartphone. And digital first is how brands are going to get built. And so we're really proud that Bonobos is the first example in the US of that strategy and feel very fortunate that we've been able to kind of pioneers get the arrows, settlers get the gold, fight through a lot of the challenges of how do you build an internet-driven brand. And it turns out that you do need stores, but stores are different and they're experiential. It turns out that there is a way to digitally market your brand, but it's not going crazy with online advertising. It turns out that customer service is an important part of the story. How do you deliver that? So we feel fortunate to be on the tip of the spear of that movement.
So that's a great segue into digital and the brick and mortar. I mean, I think when you guys launched almost 10 years ago, it was very provocative that you were launching a brand on e-commerce only. And it sounded at the time that that was going to be the long-term vision of the company, just stay e-commerce. And I would imagine that a lot of the investors thought that was a very interesting way to launch as well, especially a decade ago. But you've since evolved, and now you've been picked up in Nordstrom stores. You have your own guide shops, your own brick and mortar stores that span California to New York.
Yeah.
When did you decide to evolve, or is that a pivot? And can you not make enough money as an online retailer?
Yeah, so I would call it an evolution. Bonobos is named after the most evolved animal on the planet, so we've got to call it an evolution. I don't think we really changed our core business model, but we discovered an innovation that we would never have been smart enough to figure out. And the basic concept was, if you want to try on great fitting product, how do you do that without having to stock stores with inventory? And so I can't quite see out, but raise your hand if you've been to a Bonobos guide shop. Okay, so we've got a lot more work to do. We have 21 guide shops now, and we think we'll have 100 by 2020. And the way they work is you come in, you try on the product, you get fitted. We offer you a lot more fit depth in the sizing and breadth in the different kinds of silhouettes and color. Thousands and thousands of variants across pants, shirts, suits, which is why you get this almost custom fit without the weight of custom. And we do it without having to stock the store. So if you would have told me in 2007 when we started the company that we were going to create stores where we don't have inventory for take home, and that was going to be kind of the second contrarian insight at the company after the first, which was creating a better fitting pant and launching on the internet, I would have told you were crazy. And so be careful what you say as an entrepreneur, because if your business works at some point, it's going to make you a liar. And it was an accident of experimentation. It was like the potato chip, which is rumored to have been an accident. It hits the frying pan and it tastes much better than you think a potato skin would taste. We had 2 fitting rooms in our lobby, and we had guys who would come in and try on clothes. We were trying to kind of evaluate, train up a direct sales force. In fact, somewhere here, raise your hand, Mark Lovis. So I can't quite see where Mark is, but Mark, who's now the founding CEO of Truemaker, helped us pioneer this direct sales force out of our lobby. And we thought we would go to customers. And instead what we discovered is that customers would come to us, they would touch and feel the product, they would place an order, and they would walk out. And at some point I said, Mark, how's our direct sales force going? And he said, I don't think you want a direct sales force, Andy. I think what you want to do is roll these showrooms out across the country. And I said, you're out of your mind. Bonobos would never do brick and mortar retail. And sure enough, that's exactly what we ended up doing when we discovered that customers love it. They have amazing economics. They're just as good at delivering a 75 to 80 net promoter score, which I think is a little bit of an over-vaunted metric, but people absolutely love the experience. And now it's a really core part of how we build the brand out.
So let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about you as the CEO. Let's talk about co-founders. You started this company with a friend. You had a co-founder for quite a bit of time. Is it a good thing to have a co-founder? What did you learn through the experience? And if you were to do it all over again, would you have always been a one-man show, or would you go back and hire a co-founder?
It's funny. I was reading an article recently about the value of having a great partner to the U.S. president. So no one challenges the U.S. president. And so you actually want a great spouse who can challenge you because no one challenges you the rest of the day. And it was in the New Yorker, and it happened to be about Melania Trump and Donald Trump and their relationship, and I won't go into that. But I think the value of having someone who disagrees with you in your personal life and in your professional life is enormous. And so you actually want to run things, whether it's a family, whether it's your personal life, whether it's a company, with that ability to have dissenting conversations built into the culture and the fabric of your life. And that, I think, is the value of having a co-founder in the early days. And if I could go back, not only would I do it again, but we had to do it that way because we each brought unique ingredients to the picture, right? Certainly from my perspective, Brian was the creative and product visionary behind the company. He was the genius who invented better fitting pants. I was kind of the guy that said, let's sell these on the internet and build that channel in that way and try to do it in a new way. What I then discovered is that friendship in business is really hard. And so I like to joke that if you want to go into business with one of your friends, and I don't want to flip the tables on you here today because I know that you're working on a side project, Birdies, which is a really cool shoe brand. You have to realize that there's going to be, the elements of friendship are sometimes going to be sublimated to the priorities of the business. And at some point, not for every friends that go into a business partnership, the value of that can come to trump the friendship, and then you have to ask yourself, is this worth it? And I give a ton of credit to Brian that when that day came for us, which was a couple years in, after a very difficult year, he agreed to step aside and move on to his next venture. And I think in many ways he proved that he was the better entrepreneur by going and doing not just one great company with Bonobos, but now a second with Trunk Club. And for those of you that don't know the story, within 5 years had an amazing exit with Nordstrom and proved that a lot of the things that we used to disagree about, being scrappy, bootstrapping, building a high energy sales team, things that he brought to the Trunk Club story, he was able to execute, I think, almost more effectively once we got to that point without having to go through this co-founder disagreement. So I think it moves in eras. In our case, if we had to go back to the beginning, I think there was no other way to do it.
So you are the CEO of Bonobos, but at one time you gave up the throne and handed it over to somebody else who was there for about 3 months. What was that experience like? What made you decide it was time to hire another CEO to replace you? And then now that you're back at the helm, what have you learned and what are you doing differently?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I spent 8 years building the company and went through the co-founder situation that we just alluded to, a number of other difficult interpersonal challenges that you go through in building a company. I think that founding CEO is one of the toughest jobs in the world. It's also one of the best jobs in the world because it's all your fault. You can't blame anyone else. You can't even do what a lot of people do in the public company CEO world and blame the last person. So it's a hugely emotionally grueling journey. And after 8 years and 127 million of capital raised and a few hundred employees and a couple of major strategic evolutions of the business, I was just burnt out, plain and simple. And I had a chance to hire a mentor into the company and was incredibly excited about it. And unfortunately, it didn't take. People say that new CEOs, you have kind of a 50-50 chance that it works out. And it's a complex thing to figure out exactly why it didn't take. But it didn't work. And so we agreed I should come back in. I came back in quickly. We made that decision fast, within a summer, as you point out. And from the benefit of distance, I realized two things. One, I had this profound gratitude for the job that was new. I had some resentment that built up over the years towards how much stress and pressure there is. And then I realized from the outside, from kind of the chairman post, what a privilege it is to lead a tribe of people and what a privilege it is to build and create something. So I had a lot more humility and gratitude coming back factored in, number one. And number two, from the distance of being the chairman, I felt like there's a bunch of stuff that I had been doing where I was like, what was that guy doing? Referring to myself, right? Just a lot of decisions that I had made, one of which is we had 3 brands. And so since, as an example, coming back, we've gotten more focused. We have moved to a mono-brand model. We took a women's brand, which turns out to be a totally different animal. It's called AYR. We've spun that out.
I love their jeans, by the way.
It's a great product, and it deserves the pressure and the excitement of its own 4 walls, its own investors, its own balance sheet. So there were probably like 3 or 4 decisions like that. And so coming back, has been super exciting to bring some more focus and some more gratitude into the role.
So you talked about fundraising, and kudos to you. I've never met such a good fundraiser as you. I think over $125 million raised so far. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? There's a lot of people looking to raise money soon. How much is too much? And has it been a good thing for you? And is there pressure for you at this stage in the game to go public?
I think that one of the things in Silicon Valley that we get wrong is this idea that the company getting more capital is probably good news. I think it's a good sign that the company can raise more capital It's generally good when smart people get attached to companies who can help advise entrepreneurs and who can provide that same dissent at the board level. But it's a bad thing in a way, if you think about it, that a company needs more capital in some regard, or up to a point. And it's hard to figure out where the edge of that is. I think from our perspective, if I could go back and do Bonobos again, knowing what I know now, I think we could probably raise 20 to 50 million and do a similar version of the same story. If we could have invented the guide shop in 2007, if we could have realized what the power was of shirts and suits earlier and how to get to a great fit in those products, if we had done our Nordstrom partnership earlier, which has been absolutely transformative for us. Hindsight is 2020. And this comes back to pioneers get the arrow, settlers get the gold. And I think one of the arrows that we've taken is we've had to raise a lot of capital. And the challenge with that is it ratchets the expectation about what you're going to accomplish. And so luckily now we have a big, hairy, audacious goal at Bonobos, which is, we call it to be the first billion-dollar men's brand. That's North America alone, and that's in net revenues. Really since Ralph Lauren was launched in 1967 and Brooks Brothers was launched in 1818. Those are the other two folks that have gotten to $1 billion, and it's not out of the question that we can do that. And so I like to say this opportunity comes along once a century. So I guess the good and the bad news is the expectations are high, but I don't think we should necessarily always celebrate the latest capital raise as the best thing in the world for a company. I think we should investigate, what does this imply about the path to profitability?
So I recently read an article that you wrote on Medium on digitally native vertical brands, and I believe that's a term that you coined yourself, right? That's a new term?
Well, I thought it needed a name. I think that there's a lot of companies from e-commerce that have been some of the more readily available failures in the media. And then I hear from a lot of the entrepreneurs who are building these great brands that I think are the next generation brands. They can't raise capital in some cases because investors are saying, we don't do e-commerce. So I just wanted to clarify the difference between e-commerce selling other people's brands, which I think is a business that's been pretty handily won in the United States by what's almost approaching a monopolist in Amazon. And it's a good monopoly from the vantage point that it's competing with a huge brick and mortar industry, which is why it's not exactly a monopoly if you look at overall retail. But that model of third-party selling is very different than building your own brand, where you have got a proprietary experience, proprietary selection. And ultimately, I think that over the next 50 years, whether we're talking about Warby Parker or Casper, Bonobos or Birdies, Air or Monica and Andy, Interior Define or Everlane, all these great brands coming up, I think is the future of retail. And I'm really excited about it. So I wanted to share why I thought it was different than quote-unquote e-commerce.
So what's the trend with these DNVBs, digitally native vertical brands? What's the trend? Who's getting funded today? What are they doing right? And what are the current ones not doing as well as they could be doing?
So the thing that's exciting about it is it's a bundle of customer experience, which is driven by two things, customer service and web mobile experience and whatever the offline is, and a physical product. And that physical product ideally is something differentiated that wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for the fact that the brands were digitally native. So I think that bundle is powerful. So if you look at the mattress category, Tuft & Needle and Casper, I mean, if you're running one of the big mattress companies right now and you're not scared of their growth rate and what they're doing, and maybe another 10 fast followers, it's so exciting because the mattress industry, people know as consumers, is broken. And so that's where you get real innovation, is when you're somehow finding a way to deliver a better product or service. I think where people get it wrong is they think just because we're digitally native, consumers are going to buy it. So we're going to take a random category and we're going to just, sell a table like this online. Well, why does a consumer care about a table like this? That may be perfectly served by fill in the blank. West Elm may make a perfect table like this. I don't know. So you have to take the filter of how can we actually bring real innovation to the category as a function of the fact that we're digital.
All right, I'm being told we have less than 1 minute, so I'm going to skip a few. I'll follow up in an email to get those answers from you.
Sounds good.
So we're going to jump into a quick lightning round that I love. I have not shared with you these questions, or any of my questions actually, but you're going to have to answer very quickly. I've got about 8 questions here for you. Ready?
Great.
Your favorite Bonobos pant?
That's going to be the Clarks, which was our original royal blue Chicago Cubs pant.
The dumbest thing a VC has ever said to you?
Thanks for breakfast.
The biggest mistake you've ever made at Bonobos?
Not being self-aware enough about the fact that I still wanted to run the company.
The best hire you've ever made at Bonobos?
Brad Andrews, our chief merchandising officer.
How many pairs of glow-in-the-dark ghost pants have you ever sold?
7, and they were all returned.
The moment you thought Bonobos was finished?
Unfortunately, somewhere in front of us. Not true. Mother's Day 2009, we sold $0. Our guys care about their moms.
When was the moment you realized Bonobos would be big?
Still waiting.
All right, last. The best NBA team ever, the 96 Bulls or the 2016 Warriors?
72-10. 96 Bulls.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jordan and Pippen, come on. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.